We've all heard of second book syndrome, but what about the opposite? What about a series where the second or third or fourth book is better than the first book? I feel like those are a little bit more rare, and I want to talk about them today. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam, and today we are talking about books where the sequel was better than the first book. This might get a little controversial because some people are going to disagree with me. That's fine. These are my opinions. You are free to have your own. In this video, we are going to be joined by Soda Pop, who decided to throw himself down the stairs. So we're keeping an eye on him because he is very little, and that was quite a fall. You're really good at falling, aren't you? He does that, actually. Like, the stairs is not the first time he has fallen off of something very high. He has no fear. He will jump off of anything. It is terrifying. So he is sticking close today so we can make sure he's fine, but he appears to be fine. Before we jump into the 4 series where I think the sequels are better than the first book, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon will notify you when I post. Let's jump into the books. Alright, so we're gonna start off super controversial because I feel like not a whole lot of people have this opinion. I know there are others that have this opinion, but I feel like it's not a very popular opinion. So, the first series where I feel like the first book was the worst is Throne of Glass. Hear me out. I hated the first 4 books of this series. I didn't hate the third one, but I hated books 1, 2, and 4. I never even finished Assassin's Blade like that. I DNF'd it halfway through. However, Empire of Storms was like a completely different series. That book was what I wanted out of this series. So I read the last 3 books in like 2 days total. Like, I flew through the last 3 of those books. I absolutely adored them, and it was like a completely different series. And when I go to reread this series someday, I will be starting from book 3. The first 2 just don't even exist in my mind. And I feel like there's a lot of reasons. I'm not a huge fan of assassin stories in general. So I feel like the first 2 books are much more like competition, assassin. Like, I'm getting bored of the competition thing. Now, this was written in like peak competition era of writing, so like that makes perfect sense. But I have read so many of them because I was such a dystopian girl. I'm getting a little tired of them. So that could be why I didn't enjoy the first 2 books. Is the first book especially is very competition heavy and I was bored. But books 5, 6, and 7 make reading the first 4 books worth it, in my opinion. So if you also didn't like the first couple of books, keep going. I promise. It's going to be really painful getting through to book 5, but once you get there, it's worth it. I promise. Next up, we have A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This is by Bridget Kemmerer, and this follows our main character, Harper, I think? Yeah, Harper. And she lives in DC. I think she has cerebral palsy? Yes. And she is suddenly like whisked away into this fantasy world and told that she has to break the curse. And it goes from there. It is 100% a pretty straightforward Beauty and the Beast retelling. However, first book, it's good. There's nothing wrong with the first book. But I fell in love with a side character in this book, Gray. And the second book is his point of view, and we're following his story, and I was so much more interested in that story than I was in this one. And I'm not usually the kind of person who likes like spin-offs of any sort, and it's not really a spin-off, like it is a series continuation, but I'm not usually the type of person who likes to follow those side characters. I would much rather follow the main characters. Not in this case. I could not care less about the main characters, honestly. Like, give me Gray all day long. His story was so much more interesting. His character is so much more interesting. And I just absolutely ate up the second book. And the third one, for that matter. The next one is going to be absolutely no surprise to anybody. I feel like everybody has this opinion, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Honestly, the first book is like a prequel to the rest of the series. Like, the first book just doesn't even matter for the rest of the series. Like, I could just reread the second and third book repeatedly and never need to revisit the first one. I mean, I get why we have it. Like, it's necessary for, like, the character growth, and you need it, and, like, it's an important book to the series. You can't have the series without it. But none of us are rereading this series for this book. None of us. We are all just pushing through this book to get to the next one. Like, we all know it's true. And I find it kind of funny that there are 2 Sarah J. Maas series on this list, because I felt the exact opposite way with her other series, House of Earth and Blood. The first book of that series is so much stronger than the second book, and I loved the second book. I mean, it was great. I wouldn't say that it suffers from second book syndrome completely, but it was definitely weaker than the first one, in my opinion. Now, the ending may have made up for that. That is to be determined on where it goes from there. However, I still think that the first book of that series was, like, perfection. It was everything that I want in an adult high fantasy series. But this one, second and third book, so good. So good. Last up, we have the Illuminae Files. This is by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and this is a young adult sci-fi series. We're following kind of a bunch of different characters in, like, an intergalactic space war type of thing. The first book follows 2 teenagers who have recently broken up, and then their planet is attacked and they have to flee for their lives, but their ship is not doing super well, and the enemy is kind of on their tail, and they're trying to make it to this jump station. And then the second book follows some of the characters on the jump station. The first book was good. Like, the whole book is told in, like, chats and documents and AI speak, and it's super, super interesting. The audiobooks for the series are phenomenal. It's a full cast. Cannot recommend the audiobooks enough. And I liked the first book, but I liked the second book way better. Now, the third one I felt like was the weakest in the whole series. So the first one wasn't the weakest, but the second one was just, like, so much better than the first one. And that's just my personal opinion, and I think that has a lot to do with the romance in each book. This book is absolutely a second chance romance. We have characters that have broken up and then, like, slowly get back together throughout the book. The second book is more of an enemies to lovers situation, and you'll know how much I love that. So that's basically the entire reason why I liked the second book more. But that's just me. So those are 4 series where I personally felt like the sequels were better than the first book. Let me know if you have a series where you feel like the sequel is better than the first book. Maybe it's a series that I DNF'd after the first book and would like to continue and should continue. Let me know down in the comments if there's a series where you felt like the second or third or fourth or whatever book was better than the first book. And I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!